Today's presenter is Kevin Necessary. He's a freelance cartoonist, comics journalist, and illustrator. He currently provides a weekly editorial cartoon for the Cincinnati Enquirer and the USA Today network. Previously, Kevin was the editorial cartoonist and comics journalist for WCPO. He's won some awards, including an Emmy from the Ohio Valley chapter of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, a couple of Edward R. Murrow Awards, and several Associated Press Awards. He's modest about that and doesn't like to brag on himself, but I thought I ought to mention that in my intro. In addition to his editorial cartoons, he's a freelance illustrator and storyboard artist. He's worked with local companies and institutions such as Cincinnati Children's Hospital and Medical Center, the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra, and the Cincinnati Zoo. He's a Cincinnati native, if you can call the Westchester area part of Cincinnati. Being in Butler County, I'm not sure that we really are part of Cincinnati, but
to be fair, I was born within the Cincinnati city limits.
Okay, yeah. I was too, but I didn't grow up there. So he went to Lakota High School, the old Lakota High School, before it was broken into East and West. And he now lives in Northside with his wife and 3 catastrophic cats.
So, they are.
Kevin, I'm going to turn the controls over to you and let you do your thing.
All right.
Let's see where I go here to turn on the control. Here. Well, I'm going to let you share. Well, that's sharing mine. That's not what I wanted to do. That.
It's a really nice painting. Yeah, one of the advantages of this area is it's so scenic. The river is just so, just beautiful, and our skyline is, personally, I think it's one of the most aesthetic skylines in the country.
Well, you should be able to check and see if you can share your screen so that we can get going.
It says, no, I cannot.
Let me. Check it now.
Let's try this again. Yay, I can. All right.
Oh, before you get started, Kevin, sorry. Would everybody turn off their phone and mute yourself if you wouldn't mind, so that Kevin's the only one during the presentation. Thank you.
Hi. I hope everyone's doing all right. I can't wait until we can all meet in person, because this is just such a weird thing to do. And I've given several talks over the last year on Zoom, and it just does not have the energy of being actually with people. And I don't think anyone really wants to hear me talk for 45 minutes. I usually prefer just having some interaction with people, which doesn't always work well or perfectly on Zoom. As I was telling Don yesterday, my last talk was with a high school journalism conference. And, since they were journalists, I was like, okay, just ask questions, and encouraging them to ask questions. I didn't get through any of my presentation. I just spent the entire time asking questions, but that was a lot of fun. So as Don mentioned, I'm a area native. I have worked with WCPO, where I was a freelancer for several years, and then I was on staff as the editorial cartoonist and comics journalist. I started working at the Enquirer as a freelancer last year. So I got in maybe about 2 months worth of non-pandemic cartoons, and it's just been pandemic cartoons ever since, which I'm, like everyone else, I'm a little burned out on, but that's the world that we live in. But I love being the editorial cartoonist for the Enquirer. I've actually had a very long relationship with the Enquirer. So, I was a staff member in the 2000s. I interned there. This was my very first piece in the Enquirer. This, wasn't the greatest piece, but you have to start somewhere. And as Don mentioned, I am an award winner. I don't, really, brag about that, but what can I say? I'm talented, very talented, as you can see. I did not go to art school. This is all just God-given DNA talent. As you can see, this is a drawing by my 4-year-old cousin Cece. And it runs in the family. This is a drawing by me. Yesterday, it took me several hours to do. The difference is, she used blue, I used red. But that's just a stylistic choice. Yes, I'm sorry. Someone gives me a platform, it's just dumb jokes. I'm really surprised that my wife has been married to me for so long. As Don was mentioning, I do other work. Actually, most of the work that I do is not editorial cartoons. That's just the work that I'm known for. I do a lot of other types of illustration work, and I actually do have samples of those. Let's go here. That is definitely not it. So I do a lot of storyboard work. Everyone in town who does professional illustration has probably done some work for P&G. These are storyboards I did in December of 2019. And this is a commercial that was just released last month. So that's kind of neat to, for me to see. I do a lot of storyboards for P&G products and other, for various video production companies around town. So it's just, it's fun to see, my work out there in the wild. Not a whole lot of people know that I do this kind of work. Usually it's a lot of concept work. It's very dry. I do get to do some other fun projects. I've been working with Children's Hospital for about a year, and I've been working with their a brain trauma program that is helping kids, teenagers and younger kids, go through learning about what is going on with them after brain trauma, how to solve some of their problems. So this is a character that I developed for them they just call him Brainy, that leads kids through all these different problems with brain trauma, seizures, epilepsy, other types of injuries. I've gotten to do probably several hundred illustrations for children's over the last year. That's been a really rewarding thing. They've enjoyed having someone who brings a sense of storytelling into this project. I get to do something that isn't editorial cartoons, and that's a lot of fun because I can get burned out on it. One of the best projects that I did recently was during Halloween, and the Cincinnati Pops was putting on their Halloween program, and they were doing a dramatic reading of the Tale of Sleepy Hollow with music. And they asked me about 2 weeks beforehand if I would come in and I would do a bunch of illustrations. And one of the neat things about this, and you can't really see it with these illustrations, is that everything was built on layers so that they could sort of do little tiny animations as there was this this reading and the music behind it. And that was a lot of fun. You know, it was 2 weeks of really just trying to figure out what I was trying to, what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it, what they wanted. And, but, they gave me a lot of latitude to play. And also one of the things that I got to do was illustrate a children's book about Fiona. I did this back in 2017, or yeah, it was 2017. And that was, again, a crazy project. I did this project for WCPO when I was on staff there. I had 35 days to do a 24-page children's book. That was a extended, well, that was a very compressed project. I actually thanked my physical therapist in the credits for the book because my arm almost fell off. But it was a lot of fun, and I really do enjoy being able to do a lot of work for that resonates with our area. To me, that's probably the most rewarding thing about what I get to do as an illustrator and a cartoonist. I don't know how I was able to get into the position that I am, but I love this area. I love Cincinnati, and I enjoy using my artwork to to comment on Cincinnati or to provide illustrations that represent our region. And it's an honor for me. It also allows me to draw a lot of flying pigs and Reds baseball caps, and that's also fun too. Excuse me. I realize I am really out of practice with talking to people for extended periods of time. I mean, I was never that great to, of a speaker to begin with, but it was always nice to just, sit in my, I like sitting in my studio, being quiet, talking to my cats a little bit, and, just doing my drawings. So really what I am kind of known for is my editorial cartoons. And that is, something that I've wanted to do really most of my life. I was lucky to grow up here, and therefore I was influenced a lot by Jim Borgman. He was someone who was just a big presence in my life, still is. I will get little messages from Jim, now and again, and I'm a 41-year-old man, and I want to take those emails and put them up on my fridge, because it's just, it's great knowing that I'm doing right by him. When I was a kid, I would sometimes show up in his office unannounced and wait for him to get back from lunch and, just bug him and pester him. And, it's great that he is still there even now supporting me doing this. So what is an editorial cartoon? And I'm sure everyone here has seen editorial cartoons. It is a bit of a dying profession, but an editorial cartoon, as this cartoon says, really does try to grind down a story into an opinion piece and do it in one image, whether that's just a single drawing or something like this, which is more of a multi-panel image. But it's really trying to boil everything down. And that is that's a very difficult thing to do, and to do it effectively. So what I try to do is I try to take a news story, and it doesn't have to be a big news story, it can be a small news story, but I try to find something that resonates with me, that is well reported, that would resonate with an audience, and really try to get you to feel something with that story. I'm a big proponent of media literacy, and I think now in this in this era that we have of a lot of fake news and misinformation, uh, and so many channels with social media and TV and radio and everything, it's very hard to understand, to see where good facts come from and what is a good reported story. And there's a lot of opinion out there, and opinion is different than fact. Opinion is what I think, what my analysis is. There's a lot of bad opinion out there. There's a lot of people who use their platforms just to fearmonger or spread misinformation, or or get just ratings. What I try to do as an editorial cartoonist, as a responsible editorial cartoonist, is to source as much good information and factual information as possible. I try to make sure that everything that I'm saying, even if you don't agree with it, it can be backed up by facts. That takes a and that takes a long time. That takes a a level of discipline. And so I went to journalism school instead of art school, and I think it's really apparent, because if I went to art school, I'd be a much better illustrator. But I thought it was more important to understand where the news was coming from and to learn how to report on the news and how to present the news than be a draftsman. At times, I really wish I had gone to art school, because I think it'd be a lot easier for me to do the job that I do. So one of the fun things about being an editorial cartoonist is using imagery to kind of get a big idea across. So I will use cartoons are fun. Cartoons have there's a certain look to them. You got the big your big black lines. You've got bright colors. You've simple shapes. But what I try to do, it's like that Mary Poppins song, of a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. These are big, weighty issues that I often will tackle, but I get to do it in a fun way where I'm taking just goofy drawings and elephants and donkeys and sharks and whatever, and doing this mishmash and putting them in, and hopefully what it'll do is it will get you to stop. It'll get you to think. Maybe it'll get you to to swear at your phone, or swear at me. But maybe, hopefully, it'll get you talking. Hopefully, it'll get you thinking more about the issues. Hopefully, it'll get you researching more into the topics that I'm talking about. I get to I really do try to find different ways of presenting some of these things. So, I'm constantly looking at metaphors, at similes, at for instance, masks. We all wear masks these days. So you get to Halloween, everyone was wearing a mask, and and I have to make these little connections back and forth between Halloween masks and things that are scary. It's but that's part of the fun. Part of the fun of the job is taking something that might be two things that might be just wildly different, and finding a way to connect them and present a message. Another fun thing about this job is caricature. I love being able to get our politicians and our public figures and doing caricatures of them, and finding fun ways to draw them. I mean, it's entertainment for me. And if I'm entertained, hopefully you're going to be entertained, and if you're entertained, then hopefully you're going to see that deeper message that I'm trying to present. And it's it can be a tricky thing. Sometimes a cartoon falls flat. There could be there are plenty of times a cartoon falls flat. Sometimes I have to do something that is very complex. So the previous drawing, very simple. You get it, you can, you can see it very, you can grasp what's happening very immediately. And those are the best cartoons. Whereas, a cartoon like this is about the House Bill 6 scandal that's that's currently happening in Columbus, where, the former Speaker of the House, is alleged to have, done like a pay for play with bribery and, bailed out, used like money to bail out a couple of nuclear plants for his re-election bid. So for something like this, I'm having to find ways to, break all that information down, do it in kind of a fun way, make it entertaining for you. It's, every day, every cartoon, it's a new task, but I absolutely love it. And what I hope to be able to do is just to get you really thinking about the issues in an interesting way. As you can see, I really do love multi-panel cartoons. I think of myself as a storyteller. If I was going to give myself one label above all, it's a storyteller. I really enjoy taking an audience on a journey, and I like being able to, come up with these little comic strips. So I don't know if you remember back in November, we had this really weird week where the Brent Spence caught fire. The tree down in Fountain Square was presented, and it was this little rinky-dink Charlie Brown Christmas tree. You had, another council member in Cincinnati get arrested for bribery. Schools closed. All these things were happening in the space of 1 week, and so, the idea of this cartoon wasn't to, to present, wasn't to comment on each one of these things in particular. It was to comment that, gee, 2020 has just been a cluster of a year, and every week was bringing something brand new, where we were just like, oh my God, what else is next? Also, one of this cartoon shows my little flying pig, and that's one of the things that I tried to do as an editorial cartoonist, which is I try to use symbols all the time that people can very immediately recognize. So here in Cincinnati, we have our flying pig as an unofficial mascot. I've turned that into a character that can act as my voice and as Cincinnati's voice when commenting on some of these issues. So, some of the issues that I get into are big and weighty. Some of them are not. I will do national topics. I'll do local topics. I try to the best cartoons that I do, I think, are the ones kind of like this, where it's just one image, no words. That's it. I put it out there. You immediately understand what I'm trying to say, whether you agree with it or not. So I did this cartoon in 2017 during the initial Colin Kaepernick protests, and this is probably my most successful cartoon. I think I peaked with this because it keeps getting it keeps popping up year after year after year. Cartoons don't have to be funny. And I think that's something that a lot of people, feel kind of awkward whenever they talk to me. They always ask, well, this is a serious drawing. Can we call it a cartoon? Yes, it is. You can call it a cartoon. Actually, the drawings that Michelangelo drew were called cartoons, quick sketches. So I drew this last year, immediately after the George Floyd issue, or George Floyd killing. I'd say I probably have a mix of about 60 to 40 serious cartoons or funny cartoons to serious cartoons. This one was this was an older version. Actually, there's a different version of this, but this was for James, the little boy, the 6-year-old boy up in Middletown who was unfortunately murdered just a few weeks ago. And I have another version that includes both him and Nilo, who was a young boy who was killed a couple months ago down near Newport. So I wanted to give you an idea of how I go about doing my cartoons. So it usually starts with me reading the news. I will, read a lot of news. I'll stare off into space. I will get, a lot of times, a lot of my day is just, just ingesting, different news sources and trying to come up with an idea. And coming up with the idea is the hardest part, because I will usually get a lot of bad ideas first, or ideas that I know won't work. And just grinding through, those ideas is, the biggest challenge that I have. But usually what I'll do is I'll start with a little post-it note like this, and I'll come up with, a couple of topics. So this was what I did on Wednesday when I was working on my latest editorial cartoon for the Cincinnati Enquirer. It was St. Patrick's Day. Everyone was looking for, is trying to register for their vaccines. So, for the first one, let's do shots. St. Patty's Day, vaccines. I was kind of putting, doing a play on words. The second thing was Larry Householder, again, the former Speaker of the House, was the center of deliberations by, Ohio State House Republicans, whether they were going to kick him out of office or not. And the third one was, we were coming up about on a year of the shutdown or the lockdown in Ohio. So I was trying to think of playing off ideas of long-term effects of COVID after a year. And at this stage, I'm trying to come up with anything, and I'm usually in a panic. Actually, I'm always in a panic. At that point, I will just take scrap paper. I will start doing little doodles. I'll start playing with words. I'll try to see what ideas might stick, what ideas might not. As you can see, I was looking at shots, whiskey and versus vaccine shots. I was looking at someone maybe in St. Patrick's Day gear, or possibly a leprechaun, or I'm just playing around with ideas. At this stage, it's very loose. From there, I'm coming up with more solid ideas and things that I can send to my editors. So I usually try to get the bad ideas out of the way first, the bland ideas. Then I go into something that's a little bit more concrete, with an idea. And I tossed this one out, but the one that stuck was about Larry Householder. And, I got the green light to go with this one. So this is usually where I send my, as far as I get in terms of sending it to an editor. From there, I go into my pencils, and I work digitally. So I will often, I'll work on my, on pencil and paper first, but once I'm getting into the cartoon, I really work digitally. One of the reasons why I do that is I spend a lot of time playing around with composition. I want to make sure that I can do that, as effectively as possible. I will play with different caricatures or, different expressions. And before I started working digitally, I just had a lot of tracing paper and scrap paper, and I would just, Frankenstein that all together. And I'm sure that we've all done that, with, tracing paper. But as you can see, here was one of my initial sketch of Larry Householder. I decided to, to change him up at the last minute, and working digitally allows me, that kind of freedom. From that point, I did my inking, and I still do that digitally, but this is my favorite part of the process. I love inking. It's fun. It goes fast. I've built some custom brushes in Photoshop and other digital programs to replicate the feel of using a brush or using a pen. From there, I go into color. which I absolutely hate. Uh, I don't have a knack for color. It's just something that you know I I do because I have to do it. And from there, I put in all the little details and whatnot. But as you can see, this is this is a screenshot from Photoshop, and you can just see all the different layers that I'm using. Um, but it's no different than, using like different like types of vellum or acetate or tracing paper. And it allows me to make a lot of corrections. It allows me to course correct in the middle of a drawing. It allows me to play and explore and try to, um, do the best thing that I possibly can in a very limited amount of time. So that's really, how I do it. That's how I go about my my sketches and my process. I thought it might be fun to to do kind of a quick sketch, and to show what I do when I'm looking at a at a political figure or at a public figure, and I'm trying to caricature them. And I feel like we're really lucky that we have a funny looking governor. And so the last year, I've drawn a lot of drawings of Mike DeWine. And he's fun. To me, he's fun to draw. Uh, but it took me a little while to like figure out what I was looking for. So when I do a drawing and I do a caricature, I'm trying to accentuate different features. At first, like looking at him, I would always see those big glasses that he has on his face, and for the longest time, that's what I was starting with. I was starting with the glasses and working my way out, and I realized that it wasn't working. Like the caricature just wasn't working. And what I realized was the most important thing were his eyes. He's got these really deep, sunken eyes. He's got these droopy eyes that make him look kind of sleepy. And, I mean, he looks like he's just a disappointed assistant school principal. I mean, and he's just always got this very quiet demeanor. Please do this, please do that. Never gets heated. So let's see if I can do this. I have not drawn in front of a live crowd since I worked at Kings Island 20 years ago. So, what I usually do is I'll just do a, Google image search. I'll try to find, some images of him that I like, that are expressive. And, I always kind of stay, really light at this stage. But once I figured out it was his eyes, and that's where that's where everything was. That's what really started to bring these characters to life. And I'm looking at different things like his eyelids aren't this big and droopy in real life, but it accentuates that look of sleepiness that he has. He's got a kind of a nose that hooks a little bit to the left. His nostrils are really prominent. And, and these are the things that, if I wasn't putting these details in, they wouldn't look like him to me. There are some cartoonists out there who are very minimalistic in terms of their caricatures. One of the things that editorial cartoonists are doing, we're always racing against the clock. We have deadlines that are just beating down on us, and so we have to do things fast. And a lot of times fast means putting in as little detail as possible, being as loose and sloppy as possible. I try to do that sometimes, and I just can't. And I think that's another reason why I take so long in my cartoons. So, Mike has this wonderfully, like tight-lipped, mouth, his very, very tiny mouth, again, gives him that sort of schoolmarm, look. you know, he always looks disappointed. You know, he's got a weird jowl that can at times sort of flare out, but at other times sort of, you know, just goes away. You know, he's got, you know, these wonderfully craggy lines, and at this point, I'm just, you know, keeping things very loose and simple. You know, and I'm looking at the shapes, and even though I'm exaggerating the shapes, you know, with my, you know, with the caricature, I'm trying to keep everything, you know, as, you know, as authentic and, you know, as true to Mike DeWine as possible, while still, you know, simplifying it. And he's got this, you know, wavy hair, which is always just kind of fun to draw, and um, you know, big, heavy, you know, brow lines and whatnot. You know, little elfin ears. And I don't know if you've seen Mike DeWine in person, but boy, he's tiny. I mean, he's a small little guy, you know. But and if I was drawing a full body caricature, I would be using that, you know, as part of my part of the cartoon, making them, you know, just sort of small and elfin, and uh, I love playing with body language. And, you know, whereas I used to start with the glasses, I now always finish with the glasses. And the glasses also help with that sort of sleepy, you know, look of his, where, you know, he wears his glasses really low, you know, on his face. And so, they come over his eyelids, and it really gives him that look of just being, you know, almost looking down at you, you know, from his glasses, and kind of being asleep. Um, and it's been fun to, you know, like over the last year, just to develop, you know, a character of him. And that's one of the things that I have to do with any caricature, is, even though this is a real person, I'm sort of inventing a character, you know, based off of this real person. So, I know that we're kind of coming up on time, so I don't think I'll take this much further. What I would like to do is open this up to questions. I like people asking me questions. If anyone does have questions, please feel free to unmute and, you know, ask.
I do have one, but I think you may have answered it in how long it takes. I mean, I know you have a deadline, but and I do read your cartoons because it's the Saturday or Sunday paper, right?
It's the Sunday, yeah.
How long does it take you to do one?
I'd say about 2 to 3 hours to do one.
Mm-hmm.
If I could get that down to, 2 hours tops, I think that'd be great. I am a syndicated cartoonist through a service called Go Comics, and that's an online service. I don't get paid a whole lot for this, so I want to minimize my time in putting the time and effort into doing it. But I also really like drawing, and I'm very critical of myself, and so sometimes it'll take 3-4 hours to do a drawing.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, I was curious because you're lucky to have Photoshop. My first husband was a newspaper man, and I remember when they used to typeset.
Yeah. Oh, well, me too.
And they did hand sketches for their cartoons. So I wondered how long it took you. But I think it's amazing you have a journalism degree, because there are rules about journalism that I remember that he told me about. So I'm impressed.
I really did want to make sure that, when I was doing these cartoons, I was coming at them from a place of accuracy and and knew what I was doing.
Mhm.
What's funny is I was at the Cincinnati Enquirer in 2008 when Jim Borgman, uh, took his buyout and retired. And it was his very last day. There was a big, uh, a big celebration for him, saying goodbye. And, this was in the newsroom. And at the very end of that, he said, he hoped that editorial cartoons would continue at the Enquirer. And, there's only one person I know who could do it. And he pointed to the back of the room, and everybody, including me, turned around, looking for this mysterious person. And then I realized that everyone was looking at me. And about 6 months later, I was laid off.
Mm.
So, I like to say that, the Enquirer finally did take Borgman's advice and allowed me to succeed him. It just took 11 years to get to that point.
Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you. Anyone else have any other questions?
How do you distinguish between doing a local issue versus a national issue in the news?
Well, for the Enquirer, I'm mostly focused on local issues.
Mhm.
So I'd say most of those are Cincinnati focused,
Mhm.
and if not Cincinnati focused, then Ohio focused.
Ohio.
And so the Enquirer has a bunch of sister papers in Ohio. So you have the Akron Beacon Journal, the Columbus Dispatch, various other papers in Central Ohio. And so if there's an Ohio issue that I do a cartoon on, those papers will also run the cartoon. For my national cartoons, those are usually for my syndicate. On occasion, I'm asked to do a national cartoon for the Enquirer, or sometimes I've done a national cartoon for my syndicate and I sell it to the Enquirer. So, for instance, the stuff with commenting on the killing of George Floyd, or some of the stuff right after the election or after the insurrection on January 6th, because those were such big issues. Then those were running in the Enquirer. But for the most part, I'm trying to figure out, what issues matter to us, here.
Mhm.
And even then, it's very easy for me to fall into the trap of doing something that is about city council or something. Well, as Don pointed out, not everyone lives in the city proper. And also my deadlines are very weird. So my deadline used to be Friday at noon for the Sunday paper. Now it's Wednesday at noon for the Sunday paper. So that means that I'm trying to come up with something that is a little bit broader than dealing with let's say an issue from Cincinnati City Council. And I'm trying to come up with something that that enough people will understand, and will be a little bit evergreen, and still stay with with everybody, at least through Sunday when it's published in the paper. But I do publish everything online first, so everything is on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, and it's on Cincinnati.com's website. The day that I draw it.
Mhm.
Do they ask you to do things on specific topics?
No, they usually let me come up with the topics, and at least for editorial cartoons, they'll let me come up with the topics. And one of the things that I have to be able to do for an editorial cartoon is I have to be able to connect with it emotionally. It's very hard for me to do a cartoon that someone else has asked me to do. Now, I have done this before. So, for instance, right before the election, the Marion Star, which is one of the Enquirer's sister papers, asked me to do a cartoon about the 100th anniversary of Warren G. Harding being elected. And because he was the publisher of the Marion Star, and the editor of of that paper, who I know, asked me if I would do it, And I was just like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do, because it's Warren G. Harding. Who knows about Warren G. Harding these days? And you do know anything about him, he was considered one of the most corrupt, it was one of the most corrupt, administrations in American history, with Teapot Dome. And so, I had to come up with something, based on a topic that I was not, I didn't have any emotional resonance with. Let me see if I can pull this up. But sometimes those are fun because I get to, or it forces me to find a way to play around and do something that was unexpected. Let's see if I can find it here. Okay, I'll share this on my screen. So, what I did was I got to use that to comment on the state of the election and just the craziness that was happening through Warren G. Harding. And it gave me an excuse to bring Harding back from the dead. I don't know. But things like this, things like this they can be fun. They can be challenging. Just last week, I got an email from my editor at the Enquirer who said that he's been talking to the Akron Beacon Journal, and he had sold my services to the Akron Beacon Journal to do a cartoon for Cleveland's version of Bruce Springsteen, who was a guy named Michael Stanley, and their version of Joe Nuxall, who was a guy named Joe Tate, both of whom died in the last week. And they were like legends of Northeast Ohio broadcasting. And I had never heard of either of these guys, but I had to come up with something that was a tribute to the both of them. And I had to come up with something that was that tied these two people together. So I figured, well, what ties them together? Broadcasting, the radio. So the basketball is for the broadcaster, because he was with the Cavaliers for 39 years, and then I have the record from, or one of the records from, Michael Stanley. So these are tough. That's my very long way of saying, yes, occasionally I do have people ask me to do cartoons on certain topics. But I really, that's a rare thing for me. Any other questions?
Have you considered doing graphic novels or graphic shorter stories?
Yes, I have. Excuse me. One of the things that I excuse me. One of the things that I did at WCPO was comics journalism.
Mm-hmm.
And I have done several large projects based on stories that I've gone out and written. Let me pull up one of the pieces that I did here. So I did a series on, well, I've done several series. So I did a series about a group of kids whose parents were victims of the heroin epidemic and eventually passed away. And these kids were then adopted by their grandparents. And we followed their lives. And so it was a true story that took place over, around Delhi. I spent almost a year working on a story called Living in the Shadows. And I realized right before we talked that I had forgotten to put any of this in my presentation. So that's my problem, or that's my fault. So if I can find a good example of that. But that was you know, an amazing you know, an amazing project to do. Let me open this up, and then I'll share this on the screen. So this was a story about a family that lives here in the Cincinnati area. You have a mom, her two daughters, and then a son, and the son is oldest. The mom and the son are from Oaxaca, Mexico, and the two daughters were born here in the United States. The mother has a 7th grade education. And she and the son were brought up here around 2000 or the late 90s, because her husband had come up here to work on Paul Brown Stadium and to help build it. So they came up here, they had the two daughters while they were here. He was working on Paul Brown Stadium. After Paul Brown Stadium opened, he abandoned his wife and his children here in Cincinnati. He was abusive, he was alcoholic. And so you had this woman who didn't speak any English, had a 7th grade education, was always expecting to go back home to Oaxaca, to a little village in Oaxaca, be a housewife, and just cook and clean and take care of the kids and do what, you know, people have done for generations in her village. And all of a sudden she's here. She had to learn how to take care of herself. She had to learn how to make money. Eventually she became, you know, an entrepreneur. She started a nonprofit to help other women like her who were undocumented immigrants and didn't have any access to any social services, and whose husbands were abusive, and who had to learn how to take care of their children on their own. Her son became a graduate of Xavier University, and, you know, now works for NGOs and does lobbying, paid his entire way through college. Her kids also worked, you know, and are paying their way through college, all on their own. And I happened to run into the oldest daughter at a concert where, you know, she was giving a talk at this musical event. And after I heard her talk, I went up to her, scared the hell out of her, you know, because, you know, just someone coming up to her, you know, like, hey, I want to do your story. And she had no idea who I was. But she had talked, you know, she had given this wonderful talk about how she was so resentful to her mother as a child because her mother was never around. And she talked about her mom, you know, being gone for, you know, almost days at a time, and how angry she was at her mother. And it wasn't until she was older that she discovered that her mom was working 2 jobs to keep them in an apartment and to pay for public school and to pay for housing and, you know, healthcare when they didn't have anything. And I thought that was just an amazing story, and it was a really personal story that, you know, that you never hear. You always hear about the 20,000 foot view of this topic or this issue. You never hear about what it's like, you know, being that person. So what I did was, you know, I did this long graphic novel. You know, this is, you know, these are panels from the first issue, or from the first chapter. That was the prologue, and it was all about, you know, this young woman trying to get her driver's license.
Mm-hmm.
And she told this wonderful story about how she thought, you know, to her, having a car and a driver's license would be the ultimate expression of American freedom. You know, she'd be able to go anywhere that she wanted, and she would be she had these dreams of just doing whatever she wanted to do. and then encountering resistance from that from someone at the BMV. And so the mother hands over her ID, and is called out for being illegal. And then the daughter, who is an American citizen, is also called out for being an illegal, and isn't able to get her permit. She had to wait until she was 18 to get her permits.
Yeah.
And really what I wanted to do was I wanted to take this issue and I wanted to strip away all the big discussions of it. I just wanted to show what their lives were like. So I've done graphic novels like that. I've done pieces that are a lot less weighty. I did a story about the 175th anniversary of the Cincinnati Observatory, which was the first major observatory in the United States, and it was dedicated by John Quincy Adams, and it was on Mount Ida. The city of Cincinnati renamed Mount Ida Mount Adams for him. I love doing historical pieces like that. I did a story about the history of Cincinnati chili. I would love to get into graphic novels. I would love to get into stories that I want to write. So I'm very slowly assembling stories for that. But again, that's my long way of saying, yes, I want to do graphic novels.
I look forward to reading one someday.
I look forward to doing them. I'd also like to get into kids' books. It was great doing the kids' book about Fiona. I would love to get into other kids' books. I am a big proponent of education, and so I feel that those are excellent vehicles for helping kids with deal with problems or learn about issues, and just to get them started being better citizens and better people right out of the gate.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I'm going to put you in my regular feed on Go Comics.
All right, great. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
If we don't have any more questions for Kevin, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. We appreciate your presentation. It was great.
Enjoyed it tremendously.
We'll touch base back with you again in the future, and maybe have you come back in and talk to us again about how things progress for you.
I'd love to do that, and hopefully we'll be able to do it in person.
Yes, that's the plan moving forward.
That is.
Yes.
Well,
Thank you.
I really appreciate you spending the afternoon with me and inviting me to spend the afternoon with you.
Well, we really appreciate your joining us, and thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
We're going to wrap things up here.
Thank you, and it was interesting to hear from you.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.